Hi, Monica. I'm going to read through your draft and give you a second round of feedback on Project 3. Dear Jill Guzman, Health Center Director of William Patterson University. I want to kill myself. Need your open quote mark. Would you ever expect to hear that screamed at the top of their lungs in your backyard coming from someone in your family? You would never expect someone you know and love to fall down this path. You run outside to see your brother punching the side of the house in tears, gripping his hair and saying he's a failure in life and doesn't want to continue living. No one deserves to experience that. But this is what a spiraling cycle of a marijuana addict ends with, or almost ends with. My brother is addicted to marijuana and has been for over 5 years. This addiction took a toll on him. He is becoming broke, not going to school, and failing his classes. Whenever he, quote, went to classes, he was actually out getting high, wasting his scholarship money. He ends up losing his scholarship, wasting my mother's money on classes he was not even attending, and disappointing the family. Marijuana is addictive. Okay, so I think that I'll just talk about the hook here. So we talked about this, coming up with something interesting to engage with, and I know that your personal experience with your brother has served you well in your op-ed. I don't object per se to the fact that it comes directly from your op-ed. I'm not loving the fact that it comes word for word from your op-ed. I think you could have revised it, rewritten it, made it clearer, more like this was not. If you're going to reuse material, and not just like facts or ideas, but actual like direct material, you might as well take this opportunity to revive it, to improve it, to clean it up. It's like instead of the time you would have spent writing a new introduction, take that time and make this even stronger. I mean, it was a great hook. It was a great introduction. You had the opportunity to really perfect it. That said, I would actually recommend making some changes here. It's a different genre. It's a different feel. It's a different style. You're talking to a person. When you say, I want to kill myself here, it doesn't come across as if you are telling a story. The way it does in the op-ed, which is very different, right? Here you're saying, Dear Jill, you're talking to her. I would frame this story more from your standpoint, right? Dear Jill Guzman, Health Center Director of William Patterson University. Recently, I have had the immense or painful, or recently my family and I have faced a tremendous struggle. My brother, who blah, 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 went down this path, right? Like one tight paragraph from your point of view, rather than this like you point of view, would create the feeling that you and Jill Guzman are having a conversation, that this letter represents direct communication from A to B. Again, I don't have any objection to reusing the story, nor do I have any objection to that you used as a starting point your introduction from your op-ed. In fact, I recommended that. But if you're going to go down that road, either rewrite the story or revise the story so that it is the most perfect telling of the story. I mean, it still has many of the same kind of, little confusing bits or little mistakes as the op-ed version does. Or retell it from a point of view that's more appropriate to this particular genre, which I think would be a more direct you, Monica, speaking to Jill, not Monica telling like a third-person story, right? Make this about you. You're the student. You're the one in this conversation. And that's a very different feel that a letter has, right? A very personal feel that letters have that op-eds often don't. Op-eds are generally more detached, more kind of third person. Also, you've already said that marijuana is addictive. This feels like this whole like 3-word paragraph feels like a powerful rhetorical move, but I wouldn't put it here. I would put it after you talk about the dangerous assumption that marijuana is not addictive. In fact, it might be better to write here, right here where the cursor is. That might be a good place to insert a paragraph. I assume there's one coming up later where you talk about the dangerous stereotype or the dangerous assumption that marijuana is not addictive. Then, boom, hit them with the power paragraph. Marijuana is addictive. Then your facts come in after that. I think that could be really strong, right? Hook with the personal story. Discuss the misconception that marijuana is not a dangerous drug. Hit them with this power paragraph. Marijuana is addictive. Then the facts come in to back all that up. You don't have to do that. You don't have to follow those suggestions, but those feel like good moves to me. At least consider them. People use marijuana as a way to escape reality. It takes them to another state of mind. A person with marijuana use disorder are dependent on the drugs to wake them up in the morning, get through class or meetings. A person with this disorder can't function, without the drug. A drug is considered addictive as it causes someone to compulsively and often uncontrollably crave, seek, and use it, even in the face of negative health and social consequences. Researchers have found that 1 in 11 users, or 1 in 6 users who started in early teens, are dependent and addicted to marijuana. This was found on nutrition.org. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of things here. Overall, good paragraph. Couple of suggestions. People use marijuana as a way to escape reality. It takes them to another state of mind. So, I'm not sure that it's a right fit for a paragraph that's essentially about the facts about marijuana use disorder to start talking about why generally people use marijuana. I would focus this paragraph. It also just doesn't feel like a good fit because it's one sentence about the general reasons why people use marijuana, and it's your first sentence, which makes it feel like that's going to set the stage for the whole paragraph. But then the whole rest of the paragraph is about marijuana use disorder. Now, I have some questions. You're saying marijuana use disorder. The way that you talk about it, the way that you label it, makes me feel like that's like a thing. Not like a Monica description, but like a thing from the research. Which makes me wonder, who classifies this? Is this does the American Psychological Association classify marijuana use disorder? Or is this the AMA? Like, where does this classification come from? I will also say that the fact that you only cite nutrition.org here is a little concerning, especially since this is obviously a quotation or a close paraphrase that should have been a quotation. This is not like casual conversational tone that you normally use. This is like a very technical description. It feels like it comes out of the diagnostic manual for some sort of disorder. We need to either be citing this sentence specifically or paraphrasing it more aggressively or putting in quotation marks and restoring the original language. Now, let's talk about the citations. I'm only going to talk about them here, but as is the case with all of my feedback, especially what I'm about to say, you should apply what I'm about to say to the entire project. So generally, there are two ways to cite something. The first is to do it in text and say something like this. I have to change modes. According to the American Academy of Medical Sciences. I just made that up. That group doesn't exist, so do not leave this in your draft. This is just hypothetical. Just being positive here. Okay. You do this style of citation, right? And according to where you foreground it, when the source is rhetorically significant. When you want the reader to actually and actively say, I see this name. I know this group. This is a credible group. This is a group that I want to believe. So I am going to accept the credibility of this source. When you don't have that, you typically cite by in parentheses giving the name of the author, like that. If no author is given, like on some internet articles, use the name of the article. You do not cite the website. basically almost ever. There are exceptions, because I hate saying never, because there are actually exceptions. They're so exceedingly rare, you won't run into one of them, I promise you. Not in a class like this, or even in probably at all in college. So you give the name of the author or the name of the article. That name, author or article, corresponds to an entry on your reference list or your works cited page, whatever it's called. There are very good guides for how to do APA and MLA citations, which are the ones I recommend. On the OWL, the Online Writing Lab at Purdue University, if you just Google OWL MLA style or OWL APA style, it'll come right up. I've also linked to that on the Google Classroom page. So I like the facts in this paragraph, but you need to be more scrupulous about your citations, and I would write a first sentence that better captures the rest of the paragraph, as the first sentence seems disconnected from the rest of it. Remember, a lot of what I've said in this paragraph, like we're only at the beginning, I'm not going to repeat myself. So make sure you apply that to the project as a whole. Marijuana addiction increases anxiety and depression within people, especially with people who already suffer from these disorders. Marijuana causes a person to be very paranoid because of the sensation of time moving slowly. People may experience depression symptoms during withdrawal from the drug because when a person becomes dependent on marijuana to keep them happy, they don't know how to function without it. Good. No citations, and you need a claim sentence at the start that gives me a sense of the overall paragraph. Other than that, it's a strong paragraph. Marijuana has negative effects on attention, motivation, memory, and learning that can persist after the drug's immediate effects wear off, especially in people who use regularly. Someone who uses marijuana daily may be functioning at a reduced intellectual level most or all of the time, says the National Institute of Drug Abuse. Boom, stop, hammer time. That is what I'm talking about. By the way, that was a 1980s reference, so I don't expect you to get it. We're just going to change this to a comma because you're continuing the thought. Says the National Institute of Drug Abuse. I would rather that you say according to the National Institute of Drug Abuse. If this is their website, drugabuse.org, then you don't need to say from drugabuse.org. You never put a URL in text. You just say according to the National Institute of Drug Abuse. Then National Institute of Drug Abuse will be the author in the reference list, and the name of the article will also be there. But here you only need National Institute of Drug Abuse. Marijuana addiction leads to more serious problems. Consider using some transitions, like your good friend moreover or in addition. When you're stacking multiple paragraphs that have the same idea, right? This is like multiple paragraphs that all build on the same idea of the consequences of marijuana use. Now, you don't have a claim sentence yet, but you would probably write somewhere around here, have a claim sentence that starts with, unfortunately, abusing marijuana comes with many negative consequences for users, or despite beliefs to the contrary, kind of hint at one of your key future claims, despite major or claims to the contrary, marijuana addiction can have serious health consequences for users. Then you put a phrase like more specifically, or at the start of this paragraph, then a moreover here, right? That way it shows the reader that all these things are linked. Moreover, marijuana addiction leads to more serious problems, like a feeling of worthlessness or suicidal thought. The aftermath of the marijuana high can result to some people feeling extremely low, bringing unhappy thoughts into their head. Sorry, you wrote it right, I read it wrong. Because a person feeling so overwhelmingly happy while using marijuana, they cannot handle being without the drug. Good. This gets at something I've been asking for almost the entire semester, which was for you to actually explain how marijuana addiction works. Since it's a psychological addiction and not a physical addiction, in the sense that, like, for example, heroin is a physical addiction, in the sense that heroin physically, literally replaces receptors in the brain, or technically replaces neurotransmitters in the brain, which causes your body to stop making those neurotransmitters, and therefore you physically become addicted to the heroin because your body is literally lacking a key, not an ingredient, but a key component of your own biochemistry that the heroin provides. Marijuana is psychologically addictive, which is to say people become dependent on the feeling that is produced by the drug. This is the same way that most things that provide positive reinforcement can become addictive. So I'm glad that you talked about this mechanism. I think another sentence or two going deeper into the explanation, if your sources provide enough information for you to do so, would be helpful. But I'm very happy that you got to that, because it's something I've been looking for throughout the paragraph, throughout the semester. That said, it feels like this sentence really should be a whole paragraph once you talk about how marijuana is addictive. Marijuana addiction is a serious problem among young adults. Good. High school and college students. This is undermined in the eyes of many people because it's not seen as a serious drug. People would make fun of a student in high school or college if they ever admitted to thinking they have marijuana addiction. That is how much of a problem marijuana is in our community. It's not taken seriously as heroin or cocaine. Every single time you write this, I tell you to rewrite it. You absolutely refuse to. And I'll tell you right now, if you want to leave this sentence in, despite multiple drafts and multiple essays where I said change it or take it out, you need to justify it. Fight me. If you disagree with me, Monica, that this is rhetorically a bad move on your part, do it. Fight me. Argue with me. Provide evidence. Convince me. Persuade me. But every single time I bring this up, you agree with me and then don't change the sentence. Marijuana is not as serious as heroin or cocaine. In fact, that's part of the problem, right? We've talked about this in my office and in class, right? That's part of the problem. Because it's not credible to say that it's as bad as heroin or cocaine, people think, oh, it's not bad at all. Marijuana's problem is that it's not good, but it's not as bad as other things that it's often compared to. So it seems like it's not good. It's not harmful, but it is. You might say something like, although marijuana is, or the fact that marijuana is not as dangerous as heroin or cocaine leads people not to taking it seriously. This is a huge mistake, as it still has very serious consequences that are exacerbated by the fact that people don't think that it's dangerous. Again, every single time you write some version of this project, we talk about this, and you never change it, nor do you persuade me that I'm wrong. And I'm telling you right now, I want to see in Project 3 final draft, convince me that I'm wrong, or change this argument. Because you always agree with me, but you never actually change it. So another problem many people don't recognize is that marijuana is a gateway drug. Marijuana leads people to doing heavier drugs because they can't experience the high that they would get from taking marijuana. Drugabuse.org states that, again, it's not the website, but the organization behind the website that is the author. And if I understand correctly, it's the National Institute of Drug Abuse. The National Institute of Drug Abuse states that researchers are now looking at the possibility that exposure to marijuana as a teen may cause changes in the brain that make a person more likely to get addicted to marijuana or other drugs, such as alcohol, opioids, or cocaine. Give me 1 second, Monica. My computer just went into battery saver. I'm going to go plug in. I'm going to pause for a second. Sorry about that. I had to plug my laptop in before I lost what I just recorded. Okay, gateway drug. So researchers are now looking at the possibility that exposure to marijuana as a teen may cause changes to the brain to make a person more likely to get addicted to marijuana or other drugs such as alcohol, opioids, or cocaine. Great. I think that's a strong claim. You've made it in the past, but not fleshed it out. I feel it's more supported now. It might be useful to give a little more evidence here, and the main reason I suggest that is this is a common claim. It's also a claim that's commonly disputed, and I think when there's uncertainty about the factual accuracy of a claim, it's best to provide more evidence. Remember that across the board, a really strong argument paragraph will contain evidence from multiple sources and multiple points of view. You do that very well, actually, right up here. I know it's not one paragraph, but it's 3 short paragraphs that all deal with the same claim. You give a quote from the National Institute of Drug Abuse, from NIDA, which is a credible source when it comes to drug addiction. You also give several paraphrased descriptions of the various symptoms and problems. Now, those need to be cited, but once you do that, you'll have a very strong section there with multiple pieces of evidence to back it up. Jill Guzman. A good way to solve this problem, maybe not solve is a little strong, maybe address or begin to address or something like that, is spreading the word about marijuana use disorder and the addiction of marijuana, possibly by starting an awareness campaign that will have posters with "marijuana addiction is real," making brochures that explain the addiction, side effects, and how to get help. Another way that you could impact this cause is to start a support group for students who feel that they have a marijuana addiction. The support group would be a place where no one gets questioned or drug tested. They can just come in and talk to other people about the addiction and the problems. No judgment from the people in the support group. Everyone would help each other out mentally and physically. Okay, so I would break this into 2 paragraphs, one about the awareness campaign, one about the support group. I would go into a little bit more detail about what that would entail. What you have is great. I'd like a little more. I would also make sure to explain why this is helpful. You'll also notice that as this is a bit more of an experimental part of the draft, the language is a little shakier. There's some sentence fragments, things like that. I think that because you're working through it in your head, it's a little bit more jumbled. So give this an extra hit with your when you go over it for the editing. But so far, so good. William Paterson University campus needs a change. This change can be done by you, Ms. Guzman. Students need more support from the faculty and students on campus. Marijuana addiction has to be taken seriously by the health department if we want to change the way our students are learning on campus and holding themselves together. Students should not be developing addictions. This has to be controlled on school grounds. Good. Okay. So I just want to point a few things out. You have your citations. They're actually, aside from the fact that I understand that you're using like easybib.net or I don't want to do citations manually, so some computer needs to do it for me.org or whatever you're using. I use citation software as well. Most people do. That's not a problem. But make sure for the final draft you're going to get rid of the weird, it's a different font and size stuff. Do the indents the way it's supposed to be. Just clean it up. So I want to point out, we talked about citations earlier. You don't cite the URL, you cite this. The author of this is NIDA, National Institute of Drug Abuse, and you would cite NIDA or National Institute of Drug Abuse in text. Here, you do not cite nutritionfacts.org. If anything, I read things like nutritionfacts.org, and I just want to immediately shut off and assume that that is not a valid source. That said, Michael Greger, MD, the author of the source, feels much more credible. You saw the author, the thing that comes at the beginning of the citation. You have a lot of research on this topic, Monica, not just 2 sources. Overall, your work will be much stronger if you cite a more wider variety of sources and are more scrupulous with your quoting and your data. So I'm thinking of this because we've already talked about it more like a revision than a first draft. This is a passing draft. I'm not going to put a grade on it until you submit the actual revision, but you clearly have completed the assignment here. The question is, do you want to really go for a top-notch final draft? And if you do, and you should because you're capable of it, and I know you have the research and the ability, take the feedback that I've given you in this video, really put your all into that final draft, and submit the revision and or the final draft before the 20th, and you'll be in excellent shape. This is great work. Clean it up. Address the issues that I talked about. You should be in great shape. Thanks, Monica. Excellent work.